And we're back. And now I'm joined by Charlie Pomeroy. How are you today, Mr. Pomeroy?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me.
Glad to have you on again. Mr. Pomeroy is one of our regulars on this show. And real quick, Mr. Pomeroy, I'd like to get a little bit about you for our audience who are just joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, real quick, and your thoughts
Sure.
about what's been going on this last week.
Yeah, so I've been a person that's been involved in the IT domain of corporate America and done a lot of project work. I've done project management work, mostly in oil and gas, and did that for quite a while. And now what I'm doing is a lot of this and a lot of that, or a little of this and a little of that. Do a lot of ministry work and just trying to help people and just do some small odds and ends for jobs so I'm enjoying those things and pertaining to what's going on in America right now. I think we're seeing utter chaos, unfortunately, and I think we'll get into this, as a matter of fact, is part of the things that we're going to be discussing today. But that chaos is not. I don't see it as being necessary. Number one, and number two, I think people are getting caught up in it and allowing themselves to follow it as opposed to resist it. That's just personal opinion, and we'll get into more of that. I'm sure that we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Well, thank you, sir. I
Yep.
want to grab your opinion on this real quick. There are a lot of talking points on the left and on the right about who was rioting, who were the people who were breaking the windows, and I
Mhm.
heard one person say or read one editorial that said they claimed the riots were a primal scream of anguish from America's racist past. First off, as I said with my other guests, I find that to be kind of derogatory and insulting. Uh, my
Yeah.
my take, and I want to get yours, is that there were people who were legitimately protesting the unjust death of George Floyd, and then there were other people in the crowd who were sporting Antifa paraphernalia and gear, and they were doing stuff. There are some people who say that some of the looters and protesters were undercover cops. What's your take on the protesters versus the rioters, and what's been going on with our country in flames?
Well, first and foremost, I think there were people that were definitely trying to protest legitimately. And I think I'd like to give the benefit of the doubt that there were not but a handful of people that would have been rioting and looting in that scenario. However, there's an undercurrent of this is where the chaos is coming from, and I'm going to put it out there. My personal opinion is that George Soros is the one behind this kind of stuff, and if that is true, he's not going to allow something like this to just go by the wayside. This is a prime situation that could be taken advantage of. So whether he's behind it or not, there is a group of people that is truly bent on radicalizing America in a different direction. Um, AOC is doing it through politics. However, she's not afraid to voice her support for being very aggressive. Ilhan Omar is definitely up there. Um, so when you talk about the people that were protesting versus those that were rioting and looting, I think it's two different groups. I don't think it's the same group. And what's a real shame here is that a real dialogue could have been had um, if the protests were just protests. And I think there would have been legitimate dialogue. And that dialogue has been hijacked and I'm going to say almost squashed out. And that's very disappointing because I think there's some real things that could have really benefited here. it's really interesting that everything that is done by President Trump, by conservatives, and I'm talking commentators or otherwise, they're always labeled a racist. That's the first term that's thrown out. Look, when you want to talk, you must talk objectively, directly. You cannot just throw out the hot words of the year. And for the liberals, for the last several decades, Nixon was a racist. Reagan was a racist. Bush was a racist. Bush 2 was a racist. I mean, Trump, oh my gosh, middle name is racist, you know. And the thing is, it's really interesting that of all of those people, and I can't say that I know enough about Nixon to say that he was or was not. I don't think he was. But let me read a definition for the word racist, okay? Here's what it is. This is from Merriam-Webster. Okay, a belief that race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. Now, of all the people that we just talked about, President Trump is probably the least racist of all of them. And the reason being is because he's done more for blacks than any other president in recent time. So when you start just throwing the word out all the time, you've diminished your ability to be credible. So let's kind of recap this. We're talking about the protests and riots and looting and all that. Was it two different groups? I believe it was. I definitely believe it was. And what's really good, and John Arthur, you know as much as I know. I'm a Christian, follow Christ, and I try to look at things through a biblical perspective. And Satan has always been one to hijack anything associated with Christians or with Christ. And I think that is exactly what has happened in this situation. And what's sad is that many in America that mean well, that want their voices heard, they've allowed that to happen. Their voices have been squelched.
Well, yeah, I would absolutely agree with you in that the protest over George Floyd dying, which I mean, I think everyone agrees was anyone who saw
awful.
that is
that was awful.
Outraged.
Yes,
outraged by the brutality, the sheer violence that was committed on that man.
And can I stop you there for just a real quick moment, John Arthur? I want to bring
Sure.
a big point up here, and I don't mean to cut you off like that. Somebody posted on Facebook here recently and asked a very pointed question. If I were there, would I have knocked that police officer off him? Wow. And folks, let me tell you
lends
something.
credence to the idea
Yes.
of an armed citizenry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to bring that up because I think that's a question that many Americans need to ask themselves. And let me tell you something: those that are not closely following the Christian ways, many they'd step up. Yeah, I would. For those of us that have a very, very high level of regard for police officers, that becomes a very pointed question.
Sure.
Very pointed. And I'd like to think that I would. I really would, but I'm not. I haven't been put in that situation. So, but I'm sorry. Keep going. My apologies.
Well, it's easy, and you're right. It's easy to couch warrior on Monday morning after the game's been played. You can Monday morning quarterback this whole thing, but there is a reason why the founders and framers gave us the First Amendment. And if the joke is, or the saying goes, if the First Amendment doesn't work, or if it gets taken away, the Second Amendment is there as a backup, right?
Yep.
Case of emergency. But if you look at the people who've always wanted to control people's access to firearms, they were always if you look at the origins of gun control, it was the Southern Democrats who wanted to keep black people from owning firearms during Jim Crow. That way, when the police brutally, assaulted or lynched someone, they could do so with impunity. They could,
Yeah, no
shoot
resistance.
whoever got in their way. They have no resistance. And I mean, that's where I think we need to be empowering citizens, whatever the content of the melanin in their skin. Citizens in good standing need to be able to defend themselves, because there are bad people, and every once in a while, I'd say it is a fraction of the time. You look at how many engagements a year police have with the public. There's only it's like 10 or 11 African Americans last year, and I think it was 20 something whites that were unarmed and shot. However, the majority of those actually went for the gun. They charged the police officer. They were bashing someone's head in. One of them was beating the pulp out of someone, and the officer fired a warning shot. And then the guy looked at the officer and then continued to bash this person's head on the concrete. They were unarmed, but the officer, stood in the gap and actually did their job. They served and protected. Then there are officers like Chauvin, who frankly need to see the inside the walls for a long time. I heard one pastor say it this way: "This is the time for biblical justice. You have Chauvin's brother kneel on Chauvin's neck." Or I mean, Floyd's brother kneel on Chauvin's neck the same way until Chauvin dies. That's an interesting take. I have some sympathy towards that argument. I don't know if that's the way we want to go as a nation, but I feel it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that leads me to the next question I want to ask you. Are police in America systemically racist? And by systemic, it's really important to define terms. Systemic would be something that is ingrained in the system by a policy, by measure, by authority of the system. Are the American police racist?
So I
That's a
want
real
to,
question.
and I appreciate the fact that you read a nice little definition on that. First of all, identity politics is no good, and that's really what you have going on here. It's identity politics, and it's not serving anybody any good. Derek Chauvin was a bad nut. What about the other 99 that are doing incredible things? And let me just add, not necessarily just doing incredible things as an officer, but some doing incredible things for black people in black neighborhoods. What about those? So you can't take a Derek Chauvin and hang a label of his action on a whole nationwide group of people. That is wrong. There's no place for that. So that's point number one there. To that point, based on your definition that you read, no, I don't believe that there is. Now, let me also put a caveat on this. There's two things I want to bring out here. Number one, are there pockets of it in America? My gut feeling would be yes, there are. And, I'm not even going to rule it out that it exists in the South. All right, I'm talking like the states of Mississippi and Alabama, and I'm not trying to rag on Mississippi or Alabama. I'm just saying that you can see some of that. It's still there, okay? But is it systemic, especially around the nation? Absolutely, unequivocally not. There is no way. Please do tell me how many black police chiefs we've got in this nation. And I can tell you there's quite a few, and I'm talking some of them in major cities. We're not talking about podunk America that's got a force of 3, okay? We're talking about major cities that have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. So if you want to tell me that there is systemic racism in police departments in America, you need to get your head screwed on tight. You don't even know what you're talking about as far as I'm concerned, because those black police chiefs, do you honestly think they would put up with that? Wow. That's the epitome of contrasting. That's a paradox if I ever heard it. Okay, number 2. When you talk about the systemic aspect, there is, I think, and this is where this thing is individual. It's not a group. We have to get away from the identity thing. Derek Chauvin is an example, and let me just say this in as a side point. My personal opinion is Derek Chauvin should not have been in a uniform. He had a number of complaints filed against him, and he wasn't the only one. I believe
it was 17.
Yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, this guy shouldn't have even been in a uniform. So let's just get that out there. But I think there are officers that are out there that absolutely want to do their best. And let me tell you, there's a lot of them that are extremely young. How comfortable are you with a 23, a 24-year-old handling a life and death situation with a gun? I don't want a 23 or 24-year-old showing up at my door to help me out in an emergency. I love 23, 24-year-olds. I work with them all the time. They do not have the spiritual maturity to understand how to handle difficult situations like that. Can they be trained? Yes. How long does that take? I say it takes a little while. You don't do that overnight. There is not enough time in a shooting range. There's not enough time going through drills. You can't expect young people to handle that. Now, Derek Chauvin is not young. He should have known better. He absolutely should have known better. But what
he was in his 40s, give or take.
Absolutely. And the thing is, what's really interesting here, I'm almost countering my own point. What's really interesting is if you had had a younger officer there, I wonder if that would have been handled a lot differently. Are there officers?
Well, I think it needs to be handled.
Yeah, well, most definitely. And are there officers that do have a bias? There are, but they need to be weeded out. Last point on this. I want to be clear that I don't believe that. I think there's a limit to racial profiling that should be done. All right. I saw a post on Facebook real recently of a man that has got a legit business working very hard, and he gets pulled over on average 4 to 5 times a week.
Wow.
Now just think about that. And this is in a very, this is the areas that I'm talking about, and this was not in Alabama or Mississippi, so don't anybody jump to conclusions there. I'm not going to give the location, but here's the deal. This is what I want to get at. How would you like to be in his shoes, running a legit business, working so hard to provide for your family, being pulled over 4 to 5 times an average per week, having to explain things? When you do explain things, the officer doesn't buy what you're telling them.
That's called harassment.
Well, I mean, and you know what? And that is the point. There is some of this.
I want to know who this guy is so we can get a permanent restraining order against the police department.
And I tell you,
barring
it's really
felony.
sad. This guy won't even do his business. He'll get calls all throughout the day and evening. He will not do any calls in the evening. He won't do them. And it's because of this reason. I think it's sad and it's wrong. So there
And
are
that sounds like a
pockets of
real
it.
problem with the local,
Yes,
yeah, with the local
yes,
police department.
yep. I
And it
don't
needs to
think though
be,
that
it
it's
needs to be nipped.
systemic. Yeah, I don't think it's systemic. I don't think it's nationwide. I think it is pocketed. And I'll tell you, this is where the state attorneys need to get after it. This is where it could get nipped. It really could. But that topic right there is another one. We could get into
So,
that.
so basically, you are conceding the point that there are some police departments that have a large number, a large enough number of officers that need to be disciplined or removed entirely,
Yes,
although they typically tend to be smaller municipalities.
yes, yes. I would agree with that. That I would totally agree with that.
There are a couple of places in Houston, I won't name names, but where I really think they need to have a conversation with how they pull people over.
Yeah.
However, I don't think speeding tickets are constitutional, but that's another conversation for another time. There needs to be an injured party. There needs to be an injured party. I think people would be a lot happier with police if they weren't pulled over for speeding, if they were pulled over for cutting someone off or endangering someone.
Yeah.
That's maybe, and there have to be like a metric for that, but that's not the conversation today.
Yeah.
Maybe that conversation will be had at some point. So self-policing, they're talking in Minnesota, right, or Minneapolis specifically, rather, about disbanding the police or
Mm-hmm.
defunding the police. I'm not
Yeah.
sure to what extent there were people who were demanding complete defunding of the police, where you'd have a citizenry-based patrol. What are your thoughts on that?
John Arthur, I can't use strong enough words on the air for that. That is that is the epitome of stupid.
We
Basically,
are
what
an
you're
FCC
doing.
station, so
That
I
is
don't want any
the
fines.
no. That is the epitome of stupid. That right there is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So basically, we're saying that we've got 4 officers that were bad nuts, and we're just going to totally disband the whole thing. We're going to throw them all out. We're going to get rid of the whole police department. Listen, America, Houstonians, hear this and hear this well. You can go ahead and do something like that, and if you think that Chicago, who just had the highest number of murders in one day in 60 years, okay, that was this last week. If you think that's bad, you ain't seen nothing yet. Those numbers
Well,
will
their
go into
response
the
would be
hundreds.
because we don't. I'll go ahead and defend the position for a second here. What I believe the response from the BLM movement would be that officers are, by and large, unjust to the minority population, and if not in a murder count, at the very minimum in the way that they treat racial minorities, even if it's on a verbal level. What would be your response to that?
I don't
How would a
I don't necessarily disagree with that. The thing is what is the solution to it? What they're saying is totally get rid, defund the police department. Listen, here's what's happening right now. This is happening. You've got police officers that are walking off the job. And I can promise you that if I had a uniform, I would be giving serious contemplation to that very thing. And I don't care where I'd be at in America. It wouldn't matter. I want to ask people something. Just answer this question in your mind. What do you think, who do you think is going to show up at your door when you need help if there's no police department? Okay, firefighters are not coming. They're not going to do that job. They're not paid for that. Okay, so there's one. Ambulance people are not going to come unless you're seriously hurt, which you probably will be. Okay. The only people that you're going to have be able to defend you or to help you is your neighbor. Hope you're living in a good neighborhood. And how about the areas of minorities, the minority neighborhoods, the people that truly are trying to live well, to get through, and they don't have the financial means to be able to get out of those neighborhoods, and yet there is evil stuff going on all around them. What about them? The solution to this problem is not defunding police departments. It is the absolute dumbest, dumbest, dumbest thing that you could possibly do. Now, that being said, what really makes me nervous is that Minneapolis is going to go ahead and try to do that. And here's what's really scary. For those that are listening that don't realize this, Minneapolis is heavily Muslim. Okay, and I'm not anti-Muslim. There's a lot of well-meaning Muslims, but you're going to end up with Sharia law. And if you haven't done your homework and understand what Sharia law is, you might want to go live a few months over in the Middle East.
No, you're referring to Sharia supremacism or
Yeah.
actual true Sharia law.
Yep.
A lot of Muslims live by a Sharia law or a jihad that does not include violence towards others, and that's their interpretation of the Quran. But what you're talking about is the Sharia law to the extreme, where if someone is unfaithful, or if the husband believes the wife is unfaithful, he can go ahead and cut her down in the streets, as we've seen in
Now,
quite a few honor killings on our soil in the
so
States.
anybody ever heard of Keith Ellison? Hello? Oh, and guess who is a councilman up in Minneapolis? Oh no, it's not Keith Ellison. It's his son. So now you've got two very powerful people high up in the state of Minnesota that are for the very thing that you just described, John Arthur. So
I have family and dear friends who are Muslims, but they're people who believe in our Constitution and our laws and our government,
Yep.
and they believe in right to fair trial. They don't
Yes.
believe that you can cut your wife's head off because she went and got Botox, and that's something that actually happened. All right.
Yes.
The thing that
The point
occurred.
though that I want to make here, John Arthur, and I'm appreciating that you're bringing some clarity to this. What people do not realize is the importance of who they're voting for. If I were living in the state of Minnesota and I'm a Muslim and I really mean well for the U.S. Constitution, there is no way that I want either one of those Ellison people in a position of authority. There's no way. But my fear is that they don't necessarily recognize that issue and the danger of it. And so once you've got somebody that is entrenched in there, aka Washington, can we say what's going on there? You've opened a door that is going to be extremely hard to close. And that is what is fixing to happen up there.
And to bring it full circle, as a Christian, I would never vote for an official who believes that we should say burn all Muslims at the stake.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
Someone who says something crazy like that, I would say that is aconstitutional and immoral.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: if you are self-policed by a local group that is working outside of the scope and the oversight of a police department, if your police department does not have good oversight, vote those people out who are in charge of taking care of that. Prosecute
Amen.
the department. Prosecute the officers who do this stuff before they kneel on George Floyd's neck. And if you said, I didn't know this was happening. George Floyd, or excuse me, Derek Chauvin, the man who killed George Floyd, had 17 interactions that were worth dismissal. You don't
Yep.
think other officers in that department weren't complacent with that activity? You don't think
Yes.
that there were warning signs? Vote the people out. Vote whoever. I'm not sure if it was a county or if it was a city issue. If it was a city, it would be the person who the mayor appointed would have been the chief.
One
Vote those
more.
people out. They've had control over Minneapolis for how many years? I believe it's 50.
Yeah. Totally agree. And let me say one more thing on this issue here, that when you're looking at the same kind of thing going on in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has become a place that is not listening to America. Why? Because people are moving there to get good jobs. And what they're doing is they get those jobs because they know somebody, and then they just move around from agency to agency. They're not concerned about you and me. That's number one. Number two, one way to handle this issue of taking care of police officers like Derek Chauvin, look, you might think, well, where's internal affairs on this? Uh, Boy, that's a great question. That is a phenomenal question. But here's one of the problems with that. Internal affairs. That's kind of a paradox, isn't it? Almost like the fox guarding the hen house. I don't know why a police department would be investigating a police department. Does that make sense? What really
I
should be
agree.
happening
It
external.
should be an outside oversight committee,
Yep. That's John Arthur. This is
like the
why.
PTA,
Yes, yes.
but
And this
a
is
hundred
why we
times more
don't.
important.
Yeah. And this is why, though, we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are.
Reevaluate the system,
Yes, yes. The structure of it
re-engineer it.
is good. It just needs some tweaking. Let's tweak it. And you know what? We've got the momentum to do it. Let's do it right now. Let's
Right
do
now,
that.
it would be so much more helpful to talk about civilian oversight over the citizenry oversight over the police departments, and I know there are a lot of officers who are cringing right now. I understand
Oh,
that,
I hurt for him.
but here's the thing. Here's the thing. With any system change like this, you're going to have a bunch of civilian oversight or citizen oversight people who do not they're doing is going to be the first thing that happens. You're going to have a bunch of them come in and they're going to say, we don't like this, we don't like that, we don't like the other. And yes, guess what you're going to have? A crime spike and a bunch of problems. I
Mm-hmm.
get that.
Yep.
I get that. But after a while, the people on the oversight committee, they will be voted out or voted on, or they will wise up. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, we'll have a system that internal affairs is something that it should be replaced with an oversight.
I was going to say it goes away.
Yeah.
And I would not have a problem with that. You know, it used to be that internal affairs, if you were a police officer and you heard that phrase being thrown around, you instantly started sweating. That's the way that used to be. And I don't know why that's changed. I'm not going to speculate on that. But the thing is that I don't think they're doing the job that they need to do anymore. And you know, I'm glad that
In some departments.
yeah, there is a camaraderie in police departments, and officers don't want to speak out against another one. Boy, I get that, because you're talking about a team. I'd like to know that you've got my back when I need you to have my back. So
Yes.
I get that. I'm not. I want to be very careful here, but I think that I think some changes that where we could sit down and dialogue and do it, I think would be really helpful. I really do. I don't think we need to defund police departments. I don't think we need to get rid of them. And let me say this, we don't need to make good police officers feel like they're not wanted.
Agreed.
That's
That's
what's
one of
happening.
those things. You've got a lot of officers who are getting treated like
Dirt.
dirt.
Yep.
And there are a lot of really good officers. I've had all sorts of interactions with the police, and a lot of people they tell me you don't know because you have white privilege. It's like,
Oh, I could
you,
go on that
you have
topic.
no
Oh
idea.
my gosh.
You have no idea buddy, about my white privilege. My white privilege card did not get me out of being arrested with my father because we were in a kidnapping case, and that officer was a friend of the family who was kidnapping the young girl.
Wow.
Okay,
Wow.
and I was getting interred to CPS. We had a friend. He was a lawyer. He got me out by the skin of my teeth. They arrested my father and I. We were staking out. We were, I'd say, 10 doors down, and the people who called the police were the kidnappers because the girl was in that house.
Mm,
And we found out later, my dad was brutally mistreated. We were coming home from on another one. We were coming home from the gun show. Officers decided to search the vehicle without a permission. They found the two cars with the 4473 forms. Okay, these were purchased with every T crossed and every I dotted. They threw my dad in jail for multiple nights. They beat him and they took away his medication. He's a asthmatic, and he was suffering from pneumonia at the time. So another time we were up in Utah, there was a group of people who had sway in the right places and power there. I'll leave that alone. Just let's say that we got more than our share of tickets, and we always had a cruiser following us because there was a man there who was thrown into the asylum for believing that he could run a car on partially water or mostly water.
wow.
But that's another conversation for another time. He was thrown there because he refused to sell the technology to the wrong person, and they pulled strings. Us trying to get him out of there was a nightmare. With that said, you, I've got more. I can tell more stories. Does that mean that police are bad? No.
No, no, it
Does that mean
doesn't.
that there are officers out who do bad things? Sure. Time to take them to task. They're held to a higher
Absolutely.
standard.
Yeah.
And I love the police.
I want to give one more thing for the listeners out there. If you have not done this, you want to go to YouTube and you want to look up Michael Jr., A Personal Experience with the Police. Michael Jr., A Personal Experience with the Police. Now, for the listeners out there that don't know who Michael Jr. is, Michael Jr. is a black comedian. He is funny, a wonderfully godly man. I'll tell you what, he has done some incredible things for people. And I'm not going to get into that. I want you to take 10 minutes and listen to his video. And he shares something that is very compelling. It's one of the most compelling things I've ever listened to. Michael Jr., A Personal Experience with the Police. Now, when you listen to that, you're going to go through that and you're going to go, oh man, Michael, did you do this? Did you do that? I want you to listen all the way to the end. All the way to the end. And folks, I think you are going to find out why I believe that video is extremely compelling. It's had 52,000 views and it's only been out there a week. And a lot of people don't even know who Michael Jr. is. It's a
Well,
powerful, powerful video.
since you bring it up, you want to give us a little bit, or you
I'll
want to
do
make
that.
people go watch
Yeah.
it?
No, I really do want people to watch it, but I'm going to give you just a taste. He used to live up north. He lives in the Dallas area now. But he used to live up north. I believe he said Michigan is where this was. And he was living in one of those areas that just, it, John Arthur, if people had the money, this is a place you don't go live. But he's a businessman at a very young age. He's trying to save his money and he can handle it, right? Yeah. And he's going to tell you what the rest of what happened there on one specific night. And I tell you, it would be enough to make anyone bitter. But I'm telling you, you've got to listen all the way to the end. All the way to the end. I want to encourage everybody to do it. Michael Jr., A Personal Experience with the Police.
So we'll see if we can go ahead and link that in the YouTube and Facebook videos for the show. By the way,
Hmm.
quick shameless promotion here. If you're listening to it on the radio, you're hearing this on AM 1540 or 101.7 FM if you are in Clear Lake or Pasadena. But if you're watching this online, on the When Opinions Collide YouTube channel or Facebook group. We'll have that in the description. And if you want to have a link sent to you on that, go ahead and tweet us at Opinions Collide. Mr. Pomeroy, I want to go ahead and get a little bit more from you here.
Sure.
So, Ahmaud Arbery, that's
Hmm.
one that has really been eclipsed by this George Floyd thing.
Yeah.
Self-policing. Does Ahmaud Arbery sound like self-policing or police doing it on their own or by
You
themselves?
know, um, boy, John Arthur, I'm not sure that I know enough about that whole situation to really comment well on that. I don't want to say something that I would regret later
The
on that.
short
Hmm.
the short is three men thought they saw what they would call a breaking and entering. Georgia state law allows you to pursue someone from the scene of the crime with the intent to arrest.
Hmm.
However, these gentlemen, there was no crime technically committed under the law, is what the judge found, because he walked in a construction site, didn't take a thing. And they chased him down and put a shotgun in his face. And
Hmm.
when he ducked and tried to grab the gun, they let him have it. As nicely as I can say it, they were filming for the purpose of, I hope, to maintain a certain amount of integrity. However, the gentleman who was filming says that the man who came running up on Ahmaud Arbery was yelling racial epithets. So that's one of those situations where I'm not sure where everything sits down. One of the people involved was a former officer. He's a retired police officer. When it comes to self-policing, I really want someone who is trained and who is
Yep.
under a strict set of rules of engagement when they start to use force on the public.
Let me tell you,
Uh,
okay. So, John Arthur, what you're doing right here is you are detailing what the issues are going to be if America wants to self-police. And it is going to be ugly.
you think it's bad now?
Yes. And let me tell you who the next one is to walk off the stage. Police officers will do it, and then the judges are going to move off.
I don't want to adjudicate that case.
Nope.
I don't
Nope.
want to play. I don't want to mess with that, especially if at the end of the day, the people who shot this guy, if I adjudicate them as as in error, guess what their brothers are going to do, or their cousins are going to do when I get home?
Yeah.
They're going to find me doing something, and they're going to try to set up. It's just as bad or worse than the any police. Pick your worst police department in the states.
Yeah.
This will be worse on average than
Yes.
the worst police department, the most corrupt, the most vile.
And what's going to
And
happen, John Arthur, is when people when they feel wronged by somebody, they will concoct a way to get even
eye for
under
an
the
eye,
yes
tooth for a tooth.
under the disguise of self-policing. I'm telling you, this is really bad.
Nonsensical.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
nonsensical argument, and I do wonder how many people take it seriously. But it's something that they've said, so it's time
Yeah.
to go ahead and just give it a quick note.
Yep.
So, how do you think Derek Chauvin's case should have been charged? What are your thoughts on that? They went from third and they moved it to second, which I'm not sure they should have even moved it to second, because I want to see this guy in jail as long as possible There are some people who believe that the second degree charge is going to be harder to defend, or rather harder to prosecute with, than the third.
So
What's your thought?
there's I tell you what, you don't want to be the DA on this one, right? Okay. So, and here's why. Here's why. Um, a lot of people get upset when they see situations like an O.J. Simpson or Rodney King and so on and so forth. Listen, our judicial system, while it may not be perfect, is really good. Really good. The presumption of innocence is one of the most wonderful rights that we have as Americans. So when I say this, I want people to understand where I'm coming from on this. I want him to be convicted, and I want him to spend as much time in prison for it that can be done. That's where it becomes difficult for a DA. Do you go with 3 or do you go with 2? And you don't want 1. I think that would be near
Describe what
impossible.
one is.
Well, 1
What is
is
first degree murder?
that would be your true intent. I was thinking about doing this the whole time, and I'm that is like really bubbled high. That's not. Minnesota's might be slightly different, okay, but the idea is that when you're talking about,
Premeditated. It
yes,
has to be
yes, that's right.
premeditated. Second degree murder. Third degree is malicious. Murder and manslaughter are two different things. People,
Yeah,
I read one tweet on Twitter. Twitter is interesting. It's a lot of fun to read the things that people post there because they're amazing, and
yeah,
some of the best and some of the worst ways. Someone says, "I was civics class. I know that first degree murder is murder with intent." Uh, you must have failed civics class because manslaughter is killing someone without intent. Murder is with intent,
yeah.
right? And what kind of intent? Third degree is you were doing something malicious and you killed someone while
See,
doing it.
this is
And second,
where
second is acting violence against someone and you killed them when
yeah,
you're acting violently. And first degree is you thought about it, you premeditated it, you pulled the gun out, you aimed it, and you shot. Like
yeah,
that's murder one.
yeah.
And what Chauvin did, it might have been murder one, but to prove that,
Bingo,
you talked
and
about
that's it.
proving
Yep,
beyond a shadow of a doubt. Guess what he's going to get off on? He's going to get
he's
off
going off on
on
murder
that
one.
because you can't.
Yep,
He can say all day long that, oh, I didn't mean to kill him. I didn't mean to do that. What you were doing was vile and disgusting.
yeah.
But did he mean to kill him or to choke him out? And I don't know. It looked pretty darn bad, but you're going to lose the jury on murder one. Let's
Yes.
put him away for 40 years. The
There,
guy is
that's it.
it's going to be 30, 40 years to do it with murder two. The guy's going to be 80 years old when he gets out. If he gets out, do you really think an officer charged with police brutality is going to last well in the system?
There's a couple of things on that, John Arthur. One is, all right, I'm not going to bring that up. But number the
Don't
one
drop the show.
thing I will
The
bring up.
soap is the thing.
Yeah, the a police officer in prison is not good. That's bad for him. Derek Chauvin should
Mm-hmm.
probably be very nervous about walking around in a prison. That would not. There's two groups of people that suffer some really bad consequences. Many of them suffer death, and that is police officers and child molesters.
Yep.
Those are the two, and that's just, I won't call it common knowledge, but for any of us that have worked within the prison system, I was a chaplain there in Huntsville for 21 plus years, a volunteer chaplain, I should say, and that that's just common knowledge. That is not good. I've never heard of anybody being threatened because they were a police officer. I don't even know any former police officers there. But the point is, it's knowledge. It's knowledge. And Derek Chauvin, he should be nervous about every day that he spends in a prison. He should be really nervous. Now, when it comes to the intent part, that's where the difficulty is for the DA. When you're talking about a murder too, I would think that you could pretty reasonably get a conviction on that. Now, that being said, though, what are you willing to risk? Is there other
I
things that
want to
we could
see him.
charge him with? You know, um, there's so much to this case. There is so much. Does he even get a fair trial there? Does he get a fair trial anywhere
That's
in
an interesting
America?
question. The jury pool has definitely been
Oh, it's been
tainted.
tainted. Oh my. Oh my.
But it's one of those things where it's like, can we celebrate for a moment that this guy is going to have a jury bust him? If we have the right charges. At the same time, can we pull back a moment and say, what kind of precedent does this set for
Yeah.
an innocent person? Want to be
Oh,
very careful that
shoo.
tomorrow,
Yeah.
the precedent set today for someone who deserves it doesn't set a bad precedent for tomorrow. Someone once said, it's better to let uh, uh, 10 guilty people go free than to put one innocent behind bars. And that's the tenet behind American law, because the thought is if they did it once, they'll do it again. Someone like Chauvin, though, I mean, thankfully we have the evidence. We really,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I don't think we have all the evidence. I could get conspiratorial here. There's part of me that wonders, they work together in the same outfit as moonlighting security guards. I don't know if you've heard that,
Mm-mm.
but they both work together moonlighting as security details at the same nightclub or
Well,
or
here's the other thing,
establishment.
though, John Arthur. This is the one I did see that. I did see that. But here's the other thing. So that to me definitely plays into it. The other thing, and I've not heard anything about what was um, in him in terms of, was there any drugs involved in this or
There
not?
was, he was on fentanyl and
Okay.
methamphetamine.
So you're
Uh,
talking about
it,
powerful stuff, and let me. This goes to the issue of jury pools. By the way, I think anybody that has been selected for jury duty there, they are dying to get on this case, whereas usually, everybody is dying to get out. And I think that's sad. If your
I,
only purpose for
yeah.
serving on a jury is to be on a famous case, stay home. We don't need you. We need people to take
And
this thing seriously. And as much as we think that Derek Chauvin is guilty, and by the way, the video is very compelling, that's not the only thing that should be considered here. He has rights to a defense. He is presumed innocent
agreed.
until proven guilty. Let the justice system do its work.
And I know this sounds bad. You're not supposed to have glee in other people's demise, but I'll enjoy the justice system working the whole way along with this one.
We anticipate that it will. Yes.
I have great anticipation and I'll be watching this one. I want to
Oh,
watch
there'll
this
be a
one,
lot of
and
people.
I want to see this get all the way to the end. And I'm not someone who's
But you know what, John Arthur?
philosophically.
That's true. And there will be people. You want to know what makes me nervous on this? What about the other three officers? What about them? And I wonder if we go through this trial and we just say ho hum about the other three. You know what? Those other three
We
had
do
an
need to see those.
yeah, that's right. There was an opportunity for them to step in. If George Floyd was so strong, all right, that Derek Chauvin needed to feel like he needed to put his knee on his neck. And by the way, if you're in fear of your life, I'm going to tell you something, folks. When you've got your heel on the head of a snake, you don't lift up. Okay? And I'm not trying to defend Derek Chauvin here. I'm not trying to do that. What I'm telling you is that if Derek Chauvin truly believed that his life was in jeopardy, those other three officers should have been jumping in. When they saw that George Floyd's life was in jeopardy, they should have been jumping in. It
Sure.
shouldn't have been. That's collaborative help for everybody involved, and that's what police should be doing. I'm all for
Because of
doing.
our polarized society,
That's right.
I want to make very clear, because of our polarized society, I want to make very clear what you're saying is that after he was on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and after he was saying, I can't breathe, and after they had him subdued, their
Yes.
job was to get the guy up and into the police car, as they should have.
Amen. That is exactly what should happen.
Because it's going to the internet, because
Yep.
this is going to the internet, and because this is on radio, I want to make sure that you in the comment section, I see you typing. I see you. Wait. He's saying that those three guys should have stepped in and they should have knocked Chauvin off or
They
got him
should have
up.
never gotten to a point where a bystander, a civilian, had to even think about it. That should
Agreed.
not have happened. So we didn't have one bad nut in this situation. We had four.
We had four.
And the unfortunate part was they were all at the same place at the same time.
And it does make me wonder about the Minneapolis Police Department.
Hello?
But that is a commissioner. That is a commissioner issue, or that is an issue for the mayor, the commissioner, the county constable, or sheriff, whoever it was that was in charge of that. That's their issue. Take
Spot
that
on
to
right.
task.
Yep.
And by the way, I think the Floyd family should get a settlement for this. All right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm all for them getting a settlement for this. Not that it actually fixes the problem, but it's they at this point they deserve something, some sort of anything, just to say, look, we took a horrible toll on you.
Yep.
And that's something that should really be there. So just to wrap up real quick, we got a couple minutes left. What are the solutions to the divide that Americans face today? We're in this polarized nation. What's going to heal our country?
Be quiet and do more listening. We could start there. Get your nose out of the news. Get your eyes in the Word of God, if I could be so blunt. John Arthur, what's really interesting is when you take a look at where we're at in America today, 2020, and for those that don't believe in prayer in public schools, you're going to love this. So God bless you. When prayer got yanked out of the public schools, when the Bible was ripped out of public schools, when the Ten Commandments was ripped out of public schools, you took away an environment that encouraged people to do what's right and told you there was a price for doing wrong. When you plant stuff in the field, and I want to use a farming analogy if I could for a moment. I grew up on a dairy farm. My dad would have me do something with the corn, and we would have to go and run the tractors down the rows that would dig out weeds, because either the corn was going to grow or the weeds were going to grow. And what we did, when we took the Bible out, when we took prayer out, when we took the Ten Commandments out, what we did, and this happened to me from time to time when I was running the tractor down those rows, I wasn't pulling up weeds, I accidentally pulled corn. We've been pulling corn. We've ripped corn out. And what we've been left with is weeds. And we are paying a dear price for that now. And it shows. Kids are going to school. They no longer know what is right and wrong. Mom and dad don't support the teachers. Mom and dad support the kids. And it's probably the kids that are screwed up. We're digging out corn when we should have been digging out weeds. And honestly, John Arthur, with regards to what can be done to heal this nation, I think blacks have been given great opportunities over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Boy, I'll tell you what, President Trump has done an incredible thing for them. Incredible. And I'm thrilled to see it. I'm all for it. I have a lot of black friends, and I think they're great people. I don't see color. I just, it's just, I don't. You know, they're people. They're people. And if there's really, and there is, the healing that needs to be done is we need to listen and treat each other with a lot of dignity and respect. We took one situation. Go ahead.
So if we can summarize real quick, because we're coming up to the end of the show.
Okay.
Love, listen, eat your corn, read your Bibles, and get out there and vote the bums out.
Amen.
Right? All right. With that said, this has been When Opinions Collide, and I've been talking with Chaplain Charlie for the last little bit. Charlie Pomeroy, thank you for being on. I appreciate you immensely.
Yes, sir.
You have a wonderful day, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Where can people reach you?
So on Twitter, you can reach me at C Pomeroy. That's CPO, M as in Mary, EROY _TX. At C Pomeroy _TX.
With that, thank you once again. You've been listening to When Opinions Collide on the Edge Radio Network. If you're listening terrestrially, that'll be 1540 AM, 101.7 FM if you're in Pasadena or Clear Lake. Thank you, and y'all have a wonderful day.